Hi there. So my name's Dave Craig. I'm a software engineer, and I'm going to talk to you a bit today about what it was like. Oops, sorry, I'm just getting control of this. What it was like being a software engineer, and hold on. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my notes up and as well, and I can't seem to do that. Let me just.
Dave, is it easier if I control the slides?
I'm just trying to get less than a full, it's gone full screen. I can't get it off full screen. There we go. I'm there now. It's okay. Okay, it's now got, sorry. Okay, so I'll start talking and then we'll figure all this out. So yeah, so I'm a software engineer. I grew up near Aberdeenshire and I live near Glasgow. And I work for a company called BrightSign. So BrightSign, we make, we're in the digital signage industry is what it's called. Basically, when you're out and about in shopping centres or museums, if you see a big screen, kind of TV displays with advertising or interactive guides, things like that, then we do the players that drive that content. I'll talk about that a bit later. So I've been a software engineer for about 30 years. I'm going to talk about how software has changed over the last 25 years, what it's been like as a career for that time, and how it's going to change in the next 25 years. Sorry, the meeting controls have gone. So what is software? Well, software is a basically a set of instructions that sorry, Jen. Okay, we're there. Okay, so there's chips running software all around us. So software is basically a set of instructions that chips or processors, as we call them, run. So it used to be when I started that you had a computer in it, that was what ran software, but now there are chips running software in all sorts of devices all around us. So TVs, phones, watches, cookers, fridges, cars, remote controls, you know, it's moved into almost everything we have around us. So it did used to be that those things all existed before. So you used to be able to have a TV and used to get a phone, but they wouldn't have had software. They were mechanical or have old-fashioned electronics, which didn't require programming, what we'd call analog electronics. So here's some pictures, which the top row of the pictures you might not even recognize because you guys are so young, but there's a telephone, a car, and a watch as was. And if when I started working, you said someone draw a telephone, that's what they'd have drawn, and a watch with a dial. They might have drawn a digital watch. Digital watches came in when I was about your age. But below is basically what they've changed into. So if you say a phone now, it's everyone expects a smartphone. It's got lots of software running in it. The phone at the top is totally mechanical. So you move a dial around, the dial swings around, and it's all done with mechanical and a little bit of electronics. So nowadays, lots of things around us have electronics in and that require software. So as a software engineer, that's great because there's lots of things to write software for. So I specialize in embedded software. So that's specifically software that runs inside products. So there's lots of other types of software. You might have software that runs in a mobile phone app or software that runs on a desktop computer. But the software I write is all for inside devices. And those devices, sometimes they don't they don't have a screen or a mouse or a keyboard. Most of the time, they maybe have buttons and a little display. So these are some of the things I've worked on over the last years. So top left is the thing I make now. So it's basically like a set-top box. So if you have a set-top box at home, like a Skybox or something for your TV, that's what I make, but it's sold to other businesses and shops and things like that. I used to work on first company that did pausing TV. So although these days you expect to be able to pause TV, that was a miracle when it happened. It used to be you just had to turn on the TV at the right time and start watching, and that was your shot. That was your lot. Mixing consoles, MP3 players. So these are the things I've worked on, and they don't look like computers, but inside there's lots and lots of software. So what I'd like you to do now is just take a couple of minutes in your classes and see if you can look around and count up how many devices you think have got running software. Now, if you pop it in the Menti and maybe a total number, and then a short list of the things that you think you can see around you that are running software. So I've mentioned some of the things already. So there'll be on this slide, you can see TVs, phones, watches, cookers, and so on. But I'll put you back there so you can see the Menti. So yeah, just pop it in the chat when you you've got six devices, yeah. So computer, that's always a good one. This is from one class. Got 6 devices. I don't know, maybe some of you have phones in your classes. I don't know. I know some classes don't allow mobile phones. So things like remote controls for TVs, they have tiny little chips that run software as well. Watches, yeah. So if you've got a digital watch, that's another answer that's coming in. Some watches are Fitbits, things like that. If anyone's got an activity measurer, that's got a lot of software in it. 15, 16 for other classes, yeah. There's big numbers. So if I think while you're doing that, I'm going to list some of the things in this room. Well, I'm going to go with my kitchen. So in my kitchen, I think at the moment there's 2 mobile phones. The fridge, it's just a normal fridge, but it's got a little processor controlling the number of the temperature of the fridge and the freezer, and it's got a little display that says 4 degrees and 16 degrees. There's also a digital radio in there. So the digital radio, which is normal radio these days, it has a processor in it. There's also an Alexa. So that's an Alexa device where you can talk to it and it goes up to the internet and answers your questions. So that's got a processor in it. The microwave has a processor in it. So even just in my kitchen, which is a fairly normal kitchen, there's like 7 or 8 chips. So from this, you can see quite how much software there is around you. Now, not only that, most of these things actually have more than one processor. So something like a mobile phone, there'll be maybe 5 or 6 processors that are running software to run the display. There'll be extra ones for doing various other things like Wi-Fi. So you get a whole load of different bits of software, all slightly separate and slightly different, that different people have written, all running in one object. So I see, yeah, 15s and 16s seem to be generally the common amount in your class. iPads, watches, computers, yeah, all great stuff, yeah, excellent. Okay, so if we move on, so, where does all this software come from? Well, every bit of software is designed and written by people. So companies that design electronic products, they always have loads of engineers that put together the software to run in them. So Apple, Samsung, Google, all these big companies, they'll have thousands of software engineers. But there are also lots of engineers working for small companies. Writing apps, mobile apps, writing smaller applications for desktops, all these things written by people who maybe don't work for the big companies, but there are hundreds of thousands of software engineers worldwide. And they're all over the world as well. So at the moment, I'm working with people in Canada, in California, in India, in Taiwan, and in England. So, even just, and I work for a small company, so we maybe only have maybe 30 engineers, but they're spread all over the world. And, it's just regular people that live amongst us. It's people writing software. So, as well as companies writing software, one of the biggest changes in the last 25 years, which is going to become even bigger, is the open source software. So open source software is basically software where you publish it so that other people can use it for more or less for free. The biggest example of that is a thing called Linux. So Linux is an operating system. So if you use a desktop computer or a laptop, you'll be familiar with Windows. So Windows is the operating system that runs on that computer. But Linux is an open source operating system, and it's used in all Android phones, most new TVs, most set-top boxes, and much, much more. So, and you can just go onto the internet and you can download the whole of Linux, and there is about 28 million lines of code. This picture shows that it's had over 1 million separate little chunks of code that people have submitted. Tens of thousands of people have contributed to it, and as part of using it, if I take this and put it in a product, if I make any changes, I have to provide the changes back. So it grows and grows and grows. So Linux started not long after I started work. So it's been going maybe 20 years, and it was started as a hobby by this man called Linus Torvalds, and it's grown into some of the most used software in the world. So it wasn't from a company, though companies do write some software for it, but it basically came from this little hobby, and now 40% of the websites in the world are running software on Linux, and there's all these other packages that come along with it. So if I want to make an internet radio, for instance, I can get the operating system from open source. I can get the thing that plays the audio, which is another open source project, and I can put all these things together and I can make a product or an app. And that's really what's changed in the last 25 years. It's the availability of lots of high quality software that you can put together and make products quickly and efficiently. And you're building on all this work that people have done over 25 years. So there are quite a few different sort of software engineers. So it can be divided into different specialist areas. So 25 years ago, so one of the questions was, how long have you been doing this job? So, well, I started working in 1993. So it's coming up for 30 years. So when I started, basically one software engineer could do all the work. There weren't too many specialisms. Whereas now, there's lots of different areas. So I work in embedded software. So I write software for products. There are cloud applications. So the cloud is basically software that is running in a computer somewhere on the internet. You kind of don't know where, it's just in the cloud. So things like Gmail or lots of sort of Google, things like this, they're all just running on computers somewhere on the internet. And I would say the majority of engineers that write software these days are writing websites or applications for the internet, because that's how most of the software that we use every day is used. Then there's mobile applications, so just apps writing for iOS or Android, and then probably the least common these days almost is desktop applications. So if you use Windows, you might have a special application that just runs on Windows. Now, there are lots of other types of engineers needed to make products. So what I've said here is the generalist, but what I mean by that is just these are people who cover everything. So although I'm an embedded software engineer, I cover lots of things within that. I'll do all the different bits. So there are hardware engineers, and they design electronics. So they pick the chips they're going to use, put them all together on a board, test them, make sure they all work, and put those through to be manufactured. So if you opened up a TV, you'll see little green circuit boards, and those are all designed by electronic engineers. Then you'd have the mechanical engineers, and they put that in a box, or if there's moving parts, so if it was a robot car or a remote control car, say, obviously there's lots of mechanical things designed, like the wheels and the motors and how those work together. And then there's the test engineers who put it all together and make sure that it works together. But more recently, and this is a definite trend, is there's a lot more specialists. So I'm going to give the example of a mobile phone. So if I'm building a mobile phone, there's quite a few tricky things to do. So one of the reasons that mobile phones have improved over the last 10, 15 years is that the batteries have got better. But phones still can get quite hot. So if you're playing video or doing something really, they'll get quite hot. So you actually have specialist engineers who make sure that the chips don't get too hot and that the heat kind of spreads throughout the phone, or if it's a TV, they might have a fan in it to keep the heat away. Optic engineers, so they deal with things like light, so cameras. So smartphone cameras is an incredibly specialist area, but lots of people work in it. I have friends work in it, and they design the cameras for smartphones, and that's partly mechanical with lenses, but also quite a lot to do with software to do with the optics. Radio frequency, so that's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, making sure that things don't interfere. So if you hold your phone up to, it doesn't kind of make your TV turn off. Materials engineers who make the special materials for the boxes, chemical engineers make the batteries, and acoustic engineers to make the sound, so make the loudspeakers sound good and the microphones. So there's all sorts of engineers, and these are all just things that people decide to do as maybe you end up specialized. You start off as a general, so you might start off as a mechanical engineer, but then you end up choosing to become a specialist in acoustics. So these are all people that come together to make products. So I'm going to answer a few questions now. There's a few questions coming in, so I'll fill those in. Do you enjoy your job? Yes, I do enjoy my job. I've always enjoyed my job. It's what I like doing. I enjoy doing it. Do you make software? How many? Well, so the software I've made, so the MP3, some of the pictures I showed at the beginning, so the MP3 player, that was a lot of my software in there, and we sold 2 million of those. So the BrightSign where I work now, we sell several 100,000 BrightSigns a year. So that's all got my software as part of a team. It's always part of a team. But because all my software is kind of hidden away, it's never, it's not often that people will see it. I can tell you where to look for it. So if you went into a department store like John Lewis, say, and went to their TV section, there'll be lots of products with little video demos where you can listen to the product and interact with the product. And those is like almost 100% chance that that's a BrightSign in there, and that's my software. I'll come back to the other questions. I'll carry on with this, but it's what do I do all day? Well, this is the bit that's slightly tricky, because although I say I love my job and it's really interesting, you know, when it comes down to it, I sit at a desk with some computers and test equipment, and I plan and design software, and I write software. Now this involves talking to other people. So there's people who will help design the product. So they'll say, oh, we want to make this product and it needs to do this. And then they pass that over to the engineers, and the engineers have to then come up with a solution to actually make that work. Then we design it, write it, test it, on we go. So the picture there, now this isn't my desk, because my desk was way too untidy. So this is a very, very neat desk, but it's similar to mine. So there are some computers, laptop for programming on, for writing the software, and then there's a load of test equipment. So things to check the voltages and to make sure that the signals coming out of the processor are the ones that I expect. Now, so here's a question to put in the Menti. So I was wondering how many of you had done any programming. So if anyone's been in a code club or done any Scratch or any other programming languages. So if you maybe put that in the chat as to what programming languages you've used. I'll give you a little minute to have a chat and find out who in the class has done some programming. So there's lots of different languages. That's probably another difference from when I started. When I started, there were a handful of languages, and there are more and more languages now. You can say what programs in the Q&A box on Menti. So there should be a little Q&A box, and if you type what programming languages you've done in there, that would be cool. Okay, so HTML and CSS, Scratch, excellent. So those are great things to start. I'll talk a bit about Scratch later. I love doing Scratch. For work, C, C++ are the ones that are mainly used for embedded software. For writing software for the web, JavaScript is the main one, and we use Python at work as well, which is similar to JavaScript. But all of those languages are really great languages. So, you know, if you're at secondary school or if you want to move on from Scratch, certainly Code Club does some great Python and JavaScript courses as well. So those are a great step into learning languages that you can use actually in a proper job, in a career. That's a great way to start. So this is just a picture of some of the projects that customers use. So although I sit in my office all day, I talk to people, I write software, the great thing is actually what the customers do with the products. So I did used to work, one of the questions was, what's the coolest thing you worked on? Well, I used to work on mixing consoles for recording studios. So they were about 5 meters long, cost about £1 million, and were used in large recording studios and film studios. And so that was the coolest thing to work on. It was great. I got to visit Skywalker Ranch in California. I lived in California for a while doing that. Visited Skywalker Ranch, and they were using our console to mix some of their films. So that was a really cool job. That was, yeah, definitely the coolest thing. The pictures I've got here, these are some of the things that my current project is used for. So things like video walls. So Edinburgh Airport has apparently got looks like it's above the when you drop off your baggage or maybe pick up your baggage, they've got this big digital screens and they're all driven by BrightSigns. The one on the right with the two ladies looking at screen, that's actually in Glasgow. That's in Kelvin Hall, just opposite the Kelvin Bridge Museum. And that's another video wall that we did. But there's the Dubai Aquarium. They have 90 screens in a video wall that are all looking like a shark tank. So there's all sorts of different applications for it. Sometimes it's simple things like menu boards for Costa, but they're all pretty cool. So that's software now. So another thing I'd like you to put into Menti is maybe what's the software that you use the most. So there'll be loads of these, but I'm curious whether it's an app or maybe it's Google Chrome. I mean, everything is Google Chrome, but so for browsing. But maybe there's an app that you use a lot. I'd be interested to know what that is. So if you put that into the Menti comments now, have a think what the software is you use the most. Now, it could also be, so the company I work, we used to be part of Roku, so Roku streaming video. So it may be that streaming video on your Apple TV or on your TV is where you use this software the most, because that's all software that does that. But yeah, put in what you currently use. I'll give you a few minutes to come up, have a think about that. I haven't seen any come through yet, but Snapchat and TikTok. Yep, that's kind of what I expect. I use the Twitter application quite a lot, Gmail, but Snapchat and TikTok, those have both got lots and lots of software engineers, and I think if you ask people what's the software they use the most these days, it's almost always going to be mobile phone related. It's always, I think TV streaming, people don't tend to think of that as software, even though it's all software. So, YouTube streaming onto your TV or things like that. WhatsApp and message. Yeah. So these are all done by, the really big companies. So these are huge software companies based in different places. A lot of them in Silicon Valley in California. So WhatsApp is part of the Facebook group, and they've got thousands and thousands of engineers, and they spend all their time trying to make that the most exciting experience and to kind of hook you into using it. FIFA 23, excellent answer. So yeah, games is the other one. So I haven't mentioned games. So I'm not a games programmer, and it's probably a whole different specialism. So if you write computer games, there's a lot of different languages that you might use, and it's again quite a specialist area. But whereas 25 years ago, you could pick up a software engineer and say, "Oh, I want you to write a game," and they could do that. Or you could say, "I want you to write a program to run an MP3 player," and they could do that. Nowadays, there's so much different technology. It's very hard for one engineer to be able to adapt to all those things. So everything has become a bit more specialist. So one of the things I was going to talk about now is what the big areas in software are now, and sort of where the biggest kind of leaps forward have been in the last few years. So I guess artificial intelligence is kind of a good way of describing lots of them. Now, artificial intelligence is really just writing programs which can learn. So things like so self-driving vehicles, they are being tested in lots of places, particularly for deliveries, kind of going at slow speeds. So the little van up at the top right there, the idea is that it just kind of leaves your local Tesco or whatever and goes along the road at about 10 miles an hour and just stops by your house and lets you take your bags out. Now, the way that it would learn is that you actually just give it lots of images of driving, and it tell it what the different things are. So you say, this is a traffic light, this is a person, and you just feed it lots and lots of things, and the software you've written learns to recognize those, so that then when you make it go by itself, it then can recognize the traffic lights, the crosswalks, all these different things. So image recognition. So I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, because satellite imagery analysis I think is really interesting. So 25 years ago, there were a few satellites taking pictures of the Earth, but not really, as a software engineer, you couldn't access the images. You couldn't get hold of the satellite pictures very easily. Whereas these days, there are companies that all they do is circle the Earth every day taking pictures, and you can pay the company and you can access all these pictures, and they are very high quality images, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Image recognition is also used for robotics. So if you want to make a robot that can cook for you, for instance, it's got to be able to pick up a knife, pick up an apple, chop the apple, and so that all involves lots and lots of image recognition on a camera. Voice recognition is similar to, and then Internet of Things. So I'll talk about that a bit more too. So Internet of Things is the idea that there are all these little things in your house or in the world that are all connected to the internet. Little sensors, so weather sensors, for instance. So one of my favorites is lightningmaps.org. So if you go there, you get a lovely map showing you where all the lightning strikes in the last day have been. And so sometimes if I'm sitting at work and there's a massive flash outside, instead of counting to listen for the thunder, I look on the map and it pinpoints exactly where that lightning struck. And this is because there are lightning sensors all over the world, and they're constantly monitoring for lightning, and they manage to pinpoint where the lightning happens. So the technology that making these new products possible are, so internet available everywhere. So the internet wasn't even a thing when I started work. It used to be, if we wanted to find out about a processor, we had to order the book. So we'd get a book sent from the people who make the processor, and this big paper book would arrive, and we'd flick through it, and then we'd go, oh no, that's not the right chip, we want the other one, and so they'd send us another book. And so we'd have a big library full of books about chips. Whereas now we just click on a link, download it, and read it. So that's really driving growth. Batteries are getting smaller and lasting longer, so there are a lot more battery power things. And areas that I think there'll be lots of change in the next 25 years. So there's going to be health technology, transportation, energy, and farming. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those. Now, these obviously don't fall into your list of Snapchat, TikTok, WhatsApp, YouTube as things that use a lot, but these are things that are going to be used a lot by people without really thinking about the fact they have software in them. So this is one of my favorites. Oops, sorry, I just scrolled. Oh. Let me just, sorry, I used a scroll wheel and it lost it. Right, yeah, OneSoil. So what OneSoil do, they are based in Switzerland now, and they take information from satellites that have pictures of the whole world, and they aim to help farmers. So the way they help farmers is they firstly developed software that could take those satellite images, and obviously you have to have satellite images where there's no cloud, and they could figure out where the fields are. And then by monitoring those fields all year and looking at the changes of the color and some of the reflections from the fields and how warm they are and all this sort of thing, they could figure out what was growing there. So this is all artificial intelligence. So they basically gave it a picture with fields and said, well, this is, and they went out and they found and said, this is grass, this is wheat, this is barley, maize, rice. And then by teaching the software how to recognize it, they could then let it loose on the rest of the world, and they get this categorization. So this is the data from 2020, 6.9 million fields. And most of them are grass, it turns out, which I think if you look around, that seems about right. Quite a lot of wheat, 1.1 million fields of wheat, no, hectares of wheat, I think that is. So that's great. That's kind of interesting. And if you go to that URL at the top afterwards, you can have a browse round, and the patterns of the fields are really lovely. So it's really nice to look at. But where it helps farmers is that a farmer can then go and get a zoomed in image of their field, and it shows you how it's currently doing. So the phone app on the left, so the green, the field is kind of highlighted, and the green is where their crop is growing really well. So the app goes, oh yeah, that corn or that wheat, that's growing exactly as it should be. And then the red is bits where, well, you know, that's really not doing as well as it could. And so what the farmer can then do is they can then put more fertilizer or better drainage, and they can figure out just by looking at that how to improve their field. Now, they could do that before, but they'd have to walk out every day, and they have to walk around their field and take some measurements. And what this does is it just makes it more efficient. So tractors these days, they have GPS, and when they're harvesting, they can measure how much wheat they're harvesting. So as they harvest this field, they can measure for every meter squared exactly how much wheat they're getting off it. And then when they're putting fertilizer in, they can put different amounts of fertilizer on different areas of the field. And that's really important for the environment. You don't want to put more fertilizer in than needed, or more pesticides. So by limiting it, you can make a real improvement to, one, how much wheat you produce. So you're making more efficient use of the field, but also you can do it without spending so much money. So that's a really cool one. I don't know if there's anyone whose family are farmers, but I'm sure you'd be seeing technology increasing in what they do. At the other end of farming, so this is in Dundee. So this is indoor growing. So the company is an Edinburgh company. They're called Intelligent Growth Solutions. And what they do is they make indoor farms. Now, you might think, well, why do you need an indoor farm? And so I think the main idea seems to be that, so if you want to buy something like salad from the supermarket, the salad is grown somewhere miles away in a greenhouse, put on a lorry, harvested, put on a lorry, makes it all the way to your supermarket, and then you know, by that point, maybe if I had to throw away some, and it's not so good, it's maybe gone off a bit because it was picked 3 or 4 days. Whereas if you have a little farm as part of your supermarket, which is controlled by software, so it's controlling the temperature, the humidity, the carbon dioxide, and nutrients, then you can grow the salad there, and you could buy it an hour after it's been harvested. So yeah, so that's up in Dundee. So there's lots of other, I'm a bit aware of the time, so I'll just kind of skip a bit faster through some of these things and get to answer some of your questions. Transportation is big. Electric buses are now everywhere. So Dundee, you can get from Dundee to Glasgow and Dundee to Edinburgh on an electric bus. And embedded software is really important for that, because it controls the motors and the batteries, but also the fact that you can book these on your phone makes it super easy. And obviously, if you're 21 or under in Scotland, you get free bus travel, which is an amazing thing. So the Kite Power one, this is a Scottish company. I'm not totally sure how far they've got, but I just think it's a really cool thing in terms of engineering. And that's one of the things about engineering. It's like there are ideas that people have and you think, oh, that's a cool idea. Oh, I'd like to work on that. And so this uses software to control a kite and to generate power. So the kite is connected to a generator turbine, and the kite just flies round and round, kind of in a figure-of-8 pattern, controlled by software controlling its wing, and that pulls out this turbine and generates power. So how did I get started? So this is one of the questions. So I just started as a hobby. So that's a Spectrum up at the top right, which is one of the first affordable computers that you could have. So at that point, there probably wasn't another processor or chip running software in my house. Everything was analog, and then this came in, and it kind of changed everything. But I went on to study engineering at university, so I did a bit of mechanical and electrical, a bit of computing, and then I studied music technology, which is how I've ended up doing a lot of audio and video software in my career. But when I started, it was just typing in programs from the Sinclair magazine into the computer, and lots of games, lots of computer games. So what I love about my job, which is another question people have as well, I like making things. So come up with ideas, turn them into products, and it's a very creative thing, and it takes lots of people. So this is a picture of my company about 3 or 4 years ago, and so there's lots of people involved in making products and selling products, and it's a good team effort. And so it's not sometimes people see engineers as quite solitary little figures, but we have to work as a team to do things, and it's great fun. So Scratch, yeah. So if you want to be a software engineer, well, you have to enjoy writing software. And the best place to try and find out if you do is writing Scratch. So I don't know if there are any Code Club members online, but Code Club and Coder Dojo, those are 2 great places to learn to code. Lots of schools have code clubs. If you don't have one at your school, then you can maybe try and figure out how to set one up. You don't need teachers that know about programming. You just need to have a bunch of people who want to do it. Scratch is a great way to get started, and then you can move on from there, maybe to Python, like somebody was saying, they do Python and JavaScript. And so there's Code Club has a website, and they have lots of different, they have Scratch problems and JavaScript problems and Python problems you can do. And most of them are games, and so you can write them and then you can play them. What could be better than that? So I think that's possibly my last slide. This map has actually got where Coder Dojos are in Scotland. So there are Coder Dojos spread out over Scotland. So Coder Dojo is kind of like Code Club, but it's a bit more freeform. So once you're a bit older, Coder Dojo is great for if you have something you want to do. So you want to make a website, you can go there, and there are people like me who go along and kind of try and help people get started with programming. Right, so I'm getting some questions in already, so please fire in any other questions. I'm just making sure, yeah, there we go. So one of them, if you weren't a software engineer, what would you be? Well, I really like geography. So the things I liked at school were geography, sciences, though we didn't really do computing. I didn't do computing at school, and music. So I wanted to try and mix them. So I ended up mixing music and computing. I think otherwise I would have quite liked to have done geography, though I suspect I'd have probably mixed geography and computing as well. But I think a lot of things have end up with software in them. So I can't imagine not having done software. Having to help design something in a big country. Well, yeah, well, I mean, I lived in California for 5 years. That's where I designed mixing consoles and worked for a company called Replay TV, where we made the first pausable TVs. They were pretty big. Most of the things I've worked on, I think BrightSign probably has the biggest spread because we've been going for 15 years and we make several 100,000 players a year. So, it's several million boxes, and they have the biggest impact because people see what they put out. If you had given a bigger salary and a high rank in software designing, but it was on the other side of the world, would you go? Well, one of the cool things about software is that you don't have to be where everyone else is. So I did live in California. I was quite junior at the time, but so I didn't have I wasn't paid loads of money, but then I moved back to the UK and I could still work for the same company. And in fact, I'm still working with the same people I worked 20 years ago in California. And the cool thing is that you can get paid a California wage and live in a beautiful place in Scotland and work with the same people, and so it's great in terms of salary and career. Can software go rogue? So generally, software doesn't go rogue. I mean, there are lots of people talk about artificial intelligence and so on going rogue. You can certainly write software that does bad things. A lot of software these days, if you're putting software that goes on the internet, then you have to be robust against hacking. So there are daily kind of attempts to break your website from hackers trying to extort money, or but these are just that's just what happens. So it's not it's generally bad kind of malicious people acting badly trying to do it rather than the software itself. Having said that, it is possible to write software that breaks really badly and ends up breaking worse, making it hard to recover. But that's why you test things and you design things and you make sure that it doesn't. Do you work from home or do you go out? So at the moment, I work from home. So when I was in California, I worked in California. I worked down in Cambridge in England, and I worked in an office about most of the time. The last 7 years, I've been working at home in Scotland. I do prefer being in an office, actually. Being in an office is nice with other people, but video calls and things mean that you can talk to people really easily. So, and because I've known them for 20 years, most of the people I work with, I can just chat to quite happily. And but you have to be careful. You do go out and leave your house at some point. What software do you use for your work? So the programming I do is mostly in C and C++, and it's all. I don't usually use I use an editor called Notepad++, which is just a free. That's where you type things in, but I actually compile it. It uses standard C compiler called GCC, which it's all open source software. So coding games for P7s. So I'd highly recommend start looking at the Code Club website, going to the Scratch modules page, and just starting on the first Scratch problem, and that's a really good way. There's loads of games in there. Just trying to remember what there is another one you can do. Slips my mind at the moment, but that's definitely Scratch is the best one. Highlight of my job. Getting to travel the world has been the best thing. I mean, I lived in California for a while. Used to go to trade shows, sort of, different countries I've been to quite a lot, traveled a lot in America. Visiting customers is always fun. So although I'm a software engineer, I write software for products that end up with customers. And so you kind of have to talk to the customers at some point. And sometimes you talk to the customers via somebody else in your company. They're in charge of talking to the customers, but it's really nice as an engineer to go out and actually talk to customers, because you learn what it is that people like about the software, what they don't like. And so it's very important to get them to understand why people buy your software or why they don't like your software. So I've been to Las Vegas. I used to go there a lot with work for trade shows. Nashville, I went around lots of recording studios in Nashville. That was pretty cool. I used to go to Amsterdam for trade shows a lot. Taiwan. So it's still the case that a lot of products manufactured are made in China or in Taiwan. If you speak Chinese, it's actually a huge advantage if you want to be a software engineer. So if you're thinking about being a software engineer and you also want to learn Chinese, that's you'd be highly sought after. We deal a lot with people in factory and helping us design things. So I was talking earlier about specialist engineers, so like thermal engineers and radio frequency engineers. So a lot of them may be in China, and so the more easily you can communicate with them, the better. So but travel, I think travel is always the thing that I like the most. Are software engineers well paid? Yes, yeah, software engineers are well paid. It's, people get paid based on how few people there are relative to how many jobs. So at the moment, it's very hard to find software engineers to hire because there aren't enough of them. So obviously, in order to hire people, you have to pay more money. So software engineers are very well paid. It's a good career, and you can do, it's not all about money. It's there are lots of good software engineers where you are helping the world in some way, whether it's making farming more efficient, or open source software which can be used to help renewable energy things or things like this. So I think software engineering is a great career. How many co-workers from 30 years are you still in touch with? 30 years ago. No, so 25 years ago, lots of them. 30 years ago, I still see them. I sometimes see them at trade shows, and I still say hello and sometimes drop a line, but they were all a lot. I was generally younger then, and they were a bit older, so it was just a difference in age, so didn't keep in touch quite so much. But over the last 25 years, yeah, almost everyone I keep in touch to some extent. And so people I know, to give you an idea of the jobs that people have gone on to do. So one of my friends who I worked with on MP3 players, he went to work at Apple. He was the hardware engineer for the first iPhone. So I've got another ex-colleague who's the head of, who's the technical lead, I think is possibly on this Apple smartwatch. So he works in the watch. I've got some other friends work at Apple. So Apple, this is where, Apple will pay a lot of money to hire people over if you want to work in California. So quite a few friends went there. Trying to think what other people do. There's such a wide range of jobs that people do. There's lots of software in kind of things that might seem a bit duller, like financial software. So for banks and things like that, but it's still very important. So making sure that your banking is secure, that PayPal is secure, things like that. Yeah, I mean, I've kind of focused on embedded software, but embedded software is really a very small part of all software. And so even in embedded software, there's a huge industry and careers. I have friends that design electric vehicle charging points. So they have a lot of software in to talk to the car to decide what, how much power to give it and to control the battery. A lot of the new cars will have feature where you can plug it in, and if the national grid wants to use some energy from your car battery can empty and feed the national grid. And then when the energy is cheaper, it can take the energy from the national grid and put it back into your car. So obviously there's lots of software and things like that. So I've got a friend who works in that area. I have another engineer friend who has worked in turbines for sea power. So the waves and currents using to generate energy. And somebody I was at college with designed the aerodynamics for McLaren Formula One. There's lots of software in Formula One that seem to be especially if you live, there's lots of companies in the kind of Milton Keynes in England area that all seem to specialize in that. So yeah, so there's endless exciting jobs you can have, and there's games as well. So you could, Scotland's had some great games. So Dundee was the home of names escape me now. Rockstar, there we go, Rockstar games. It was also a very old computing game called Lemmings was written there. So that all came out of Dundee. And Scotland in general has got loads of interesting software. So there's a satellite company in Glasgow that launches little cube satellites. Yeah, there we go. So hopefully I've interested you in what we're doing in the world of software. It is a great career, and definitely go and have a look at Code Club and Scratch if you're interested in learning more about it. And thanks for listening. Okay, cheers, bye.